Welcome to the Fire Authority meeting on Monday, 25th September. Sorry for the bit of delay. And apologies for absence, please. Right.
Aware of any apologies from Councillor Isaac.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Sarah. No other apologies should be accepted as apologies, please. Thank you.
Sorry, Chair. Gary Davis, ACFO Gary Davis.
Okay, thank you, Debbie. Then, so we go on to the declaration of interest. Item number 2. The Fire and Rescue Authority reminded the personal responsibility to declare both orally and in writing any personal or prejudicial interest with respect to matters contained in the agenda in accordance with the provisions of the Local Government Act 2000. Fire and Rescue Authority standing orders and the members' code of conduct. Anybody got any declarations? Steve, please.
Yeah, a new in station, which is mentioned in my.
Okay, thank you. Anything else? Okay, thank you. I want to item number 3 on the agenda, chairman's announcements. Bear with me because I got quite a few. It is with great sadness that I announced sudden death and passing of a firefighter, Stuart Davis of Greenwatch at Main Station. Stuart was a popular and well-regarded professional firefighter, friend and colleague. This is a sad and difficult time for Stuart's family, friends and colleagues. The service is doing all it can to support those that need it. Can we take a few moments to silence the effect and remember firefighter Stuart Davis, please? Members. It was fantastic to attend with other members of the Fire Authority, the passing out parade, of course, on the 31st of August, when 22 firefighters passed out of a training centre in front of their families and loved ones. Congratulations to firefighter Jenny Scoble to be awarded the Silver Axe in the accolade top award for the crew. I think it's the second or the third time that it's gone to a female, which I think is absolutely brilliant. On Monday, the 4th of September, the Chief Fire Officer and myself represented the service and the authority at the Firefighters Memorial Service at the National Arboretum in Staffordshire. As you know, this is normally held in London by St Paul's Cathedral. This was the first time this event was held at the National Arboretum, and what a fitting venue and location this is. It was a privilege to attend, and even more so, the trust of the Firefighters Memorial asked Chief Officer and myself to lay a wreath and to lead all the fire authorities throughout the United Kingdom, the Channel Islands and the Isle of Man to lay our first wreath. That was truly an honour for South Wales. Also, it was a proud moment for the Chief Fire Officer to lay a wreath on behalf of Welsh Government. Saturday the 9th of September, I attended the 999 day event at Cardiff Bay. I also noticed that Councillor Colin Ellsbury was there as well. It was a fantastic event that showed to the thousands that attended the broad width of services we provide and other 999s. Many thanks to everyone who made this day so special and engaging. On the 8th of September, Morocco was struck by a 6.8 magnitude earthquake, which regrettably killed over 3,000 people and left thousands injured and homeless. In response, the UK government and the National Chiefs Fire Council provided search and rescue support through the UK International Search and Rescue Capacity. Members know we are no strangers in South Wales, just the South Wales Fire and Rescue supporting these international deployments. Thanks go to firefighters Bland and Buckley, who were deployed from the service with USCAR. The deployment was safe and successful, and I can confirm they recently turned home. Down to the 999 day on the Saturday, this team was there ready to show the members of the public what's going on. But we had to call Gary Davis, had to call to say that our crew being removed from the day, so they had to go to Morocco And I got to be honest, I think our teams are fantastic what they do for that. This month, Lincolnshire Fire and Rescue Service hosted the Fire Festival of Rescue. We're all represented with teams in rescue challenges. Always, our teams represented the service, professional and pride. Came away with trophies. It's turned into a bit of a habit now. The end won best technical team, the third in the medical discipline, and our fire cadets from Tonopandi, and Abergavenny came second in the trauma challenge. Thanks to all the dedication and the commitment to learn, improving the skills and knowledge. Last week, I received correspondence from the General Secretary of the Fire Brigades Union asking for the fire authorities to review and consider the existing maternity provisions for staff. I asked officers to bring this forward to our HR Commodities Committee, and I passed the correspondence on to the Chief Fire Officer so they can look at this in full detail. Thank you, members. We're going to agenda item number 4. Please, on page 5, Fire and Rescue meeting held on the 17th of July. Page 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, and 15. Members happy with those minutes, please? Have a second, please. Okay, thank you very much for that.
Question, Chairman.
Yes, Councillor Holmes.
With regard to page 8, Grenfell Tower fire incident, I wonder if the chief has got any idea when the final report's coming to.
Thanks, on phase 2 of the inquiries delayed ever so slightly. I can get an updated schedule to the Council Homes after the
The reason why I asked the Chairman is because I'd like to know what the outcome of the falsification results of the material.
Thank you, Glenn. On to page 17, AM PM committee, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23. Members of that committee happy with that, Steve?
Yes.
Yep. Okay, thank you ever so much. On to page 25, minutes of the scrutiny group meeting held on the 17th of April. 5, 6, 7, 28, 29, 30. Members happy with those minutes?
Yes, thanks, Chair.
Page 31, minutes of the HR and Qualities meeting, 10th of July, 31, 32, 33, 34, 5, 36. Members happy with those minutes, Chair? Second, thank you very much. Thank you, members. On page 37, minutes of the FAPM meeting on the 24th of July, 37, 38, 39, 40, and 41. Are members happy with those, Steve? Yeah. Okay, thank you ever so much. On to item number 5, updates on actions. You right?
There's a couple of there for Alison Reid on pensions. Shall I pick up them?
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Geraint. If I could take item 1 and 2 there. So as members will know, and following the High Court ruling around age discrimination within pensions following government decisions in 2015, as an authority, we have continued to provide those people who are retiring from service, so firefighters retiring, with a pension estimate based on correcting the age discrimination aspect and issuing a statement that confirms their as-is position. So following the authority's decision back in 2021, we have processed a total of 50 immediate detriment cases. So those are, as I said, individual firefighters who are wishing to retire but are in service. We are now working towards prepping for the regulations to land in October of this year. We are running that as a project, so it's multifaceted. So picking up the category 2 cases now. So those are individuals who have retired, and we now need to correct from October their pension. We launched to support people looking at their retirement options, a government actuaries department modeller, so a calculator back in July, procured on an all Wales basis, and that was part of our strategy in supporting people looking at their retirement packages. We've also recently bolstered the admin support within our internal pensions team on a temporary basis. So we've recruited an individual to support the team as we now work towards October and the implementation of McLeod. So correcting all the age discrimination that's in the system for our firefighting colleagues. The only other thing I would probably say at this point is that I would probably going forward like to merge those two actions into one and use it as an opportunity to update members on where we are in terms of the project going forward. If that's okay.
Yes, I'm fine with that. Are members happy with that, please? Yeah. Okay, thank you. Anything else, updates?
Good, yeah, there's one on real living wage.
Yeah, we have an update on this one. We circulated to members last Thursday. Hopefully you all received the email. What that did was show you what comms and engagement we've done so far and what's still to do. And just to add to that list, the chair sent a letter into Welsh Government last week confirming our real living wage employer status. So that just adds to the list.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes, I did send the letter off on Friday, I think it was. Yeah, I was so confused on Friday because there's so much going on in my own house, my leaks and my gas leak and everything. I didn't know if it was coming or going on Friday. So thank you, Alison, for that. Anything else? No, nothing yet. Yeah.
Just pick up on the other, the strategic themes, proposed objectives, the proposed amendments that were suggested in the last Fire Authority meeting, they've been incorporated into the plan going forward. They'll be part of the published improvement plan going out. That's been completed. Refurbishment of Chiockley Fire Station, we circulated the drawings as requested at the last meeting. And there is a programme of visits that's going to be coordinated, and we sort of going out to members and asking for availability to coordinate with visits. We're going to be doing a range of site visits and obviously incorporating the works for Pontycymmer when that's complete, and Chiockley similarly, and then obviously the community garden at Ogmore Station, but it will be part of a range of other visits which will be coordinated for members.
Good. Yes, and I'm quite looking forward to the visit to Ogmore Station because that's to my heart for the environment. Thank you ever so much.
And the final one then was on Welsh language standards. There was a recommendation or motion put forward at the last meeting to appoint a member champion for Welsh language. I did circulate to members asking for any nominations, but I haven't received anything back to date. So I don't know whether members want to make a nomination or suggest any volunteers in the meeting today who would like to put themselves forward as Welsh language champion.
Back to this at a later date. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll recirculate the request again.
Okay, thank you so much for that. So we go on to item number 6 on the agenda on page 49. Chris, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Apologies for this, members, because some of you will have seen this report in other committees already. The Scrutiny Committee have considered the medium-term financial plan, and the Finance Audit and Performance Management Committee have also now had a chance to consider this for the first time. So bringing it to Fire Authority for completeness, really. The story of the report is one of playing catch up with the inflationary pressures in the economy. Members will be aware already, as a result of the outturn report for last financial year, that we underprovided for pay in 2022-23, and luckily in that year we had an overspend on pay offset by savings in that year, which left us pretty much balanced in terms of our budget. But the same thing is happening again in 2023-24. We obviously have to set our budget in the February timescale for the year coming. What we have is a situation where the pay awards that have been agreed for 23-24 exceeded the allowances we made in the budget. We effectively ended up with 2-year increases on uniform staff of around 12%. And it looks like we're going to have 2-year pay award increases for the Green Book staff of around 13 to 14%. So we have a situation where we are under-provided for pay in the current year again. That's been compounded really with the rate of inflation, which drives most of our other costs as well, particularly energy, where when we set the budget, obviously we knew that energy costs were going up, but we didn't have an inkling really about how far they would go up with the economy. And we are therefore under-provided in terms of our energy costs in the current financial year. And also a number of our other key contracts as well around ICT, telecoms and other externally contracted services. Essentially, those contracts are pegged to usually the CPI rate of inflation. So we see inflationary pressures coming through on those contracts again, which are out with that which we anticipated when setting the budget. And all of this really is we've ended up in a situation, as reported the last FAPM, that we have a projected overspend in the current year of around about £1.75 million. If that comes to fruition, then obviously we will utilise a significant amount of the authority's reserves to fund that. And therefore, it's an imperative really that we try and reduce that figure as soon as possible. And FAPM, when they considered the report, have sort of tasked SMT with going away and looking at ways we can drive that number down before the end of this financial year. It doesn't stop there, of course. The pressure on the 2023-24 underlying budget feeds into the base budget then for 24-5 and beyond. So those costs are with us for the long term. The report itself sets out the likely impact of this at the moment. We are looking at an increase in our budget of around £7 million, which is the equivalent of around 7.8% increase on the budget. That's made up of a number of things, as I've already indicated, about 1.7 million worth of inflationary pressures coming forward from the current year, about 3.3 million pounds worth of inflationary pressures coming through in the 24-5 year, and additionally about 1.3 million pounds worth of identified growth bids to maintain the service going forward in terms of its operational demands and responses. Put that in context for members, the local government settlement which Welsh Government put out this time last year in respect of 24-5 for councils was an increase of around 3.1%. So it shows that our budget pressures are running ahead of the likely settlement for councils. But I would say to members that all fire authorities, indeed all councils and all public sector bodies, are facing the same challenges here. And members, I'm sure, will be acutely aware of the announcements made by the First Minister in respect to the Welsh Government budget in the current year and beyond. There are significant shortfalls in funding for all the public sector at this moment in time. What this report doesn't cover, there are a number of key things that members need to be aware of. It doesn't cover any specific response to the outcome of the culture review. So the costs of the culture review, we provided money to fund. But obviously what we don't yet know is what we will need to do in response to the outcome of the culture review. So there are possible challenges in that area. We need to maintain investment in current response, obviously, and we need to maintain investments in initiatives aimed at reducing the demand for response within the service. And also members need to be aware there is little in the way of discretionary services that the Fire and Rescue Authority provides. So there's not the option to cut back on discretionary services as perhaps there is in other public sector bodies. Other things specifically which this report doesn't address at this moment is what may happen with regards to specific grants from Welsh Government. Each year when we budget, we can only budget on the premise that Welsh Government going to continue with its grant funding regime for a number of our initiatives, particularly around community safety and such activities. We only get 1 year forward indication of these grants. So until we get well into the budget cycle, we will not know whether these grants are going to be continued or not. Indications are that Welsh Government's draft budget won't be confirmed until well into December. So it's probably going to be into the Fire Authority meeting in December before we actually know whether or not those grants are going to be forthcoming. Clearly, if they're not, then that introduces another financial challenge to the service. What do we do in respect to those services? Do we fund them ourselves by increasing the budget? Do we try and fund them from other areas of our budget, or do we cease those activities? I suspect the answer to the latter I know, because in the past when this has happened, the service has made the right decision to continue with those activities. In terms of the report, having been to FAPM and scrutiny, I've already mentioned that the Finance Audit Performance Management Committee requested the service obviously try and reduce spending in the current year, but also that SMT undertake further work to try and get the headline figures in the report down going forward. So we try and reduce that 7 million, 7.8% to as low a figure as we can, and we will be looking at all means to actually achieve that. In terms of the Scrutiny Committee, the one request which did come forward specifically from Scrutiny in respect to the report was to understand better the reserves held by the authority, and accordingly on page 55 of the agenda in paragraph 2.54 there is a table drawn from the medium-term financial plan which sets out each of the reserves, the level of them, and what I've done there is seek to just give a brief overview of the purpose of the reserve and the degree to which it is committed or otherwise as far as the authority is concerned. The challenges I've already hinted with regards to the current year is if you utilise reserves obviously to fund core budget in year, then it does diminish the ability of the fire authority to fund other initiatives, and you have to find that money from somewhere. So, you know, in respect of reserves which may be available in the short term, you still then have to replace those reserves to do whatever it was you were going to do with them. So that's the basics of the report, Chair. In terms of decision making, there's no specific request in terms of the budget level at this meeting. Obviously, we're still in September. It won't be until the Fire Authority in December that we will ask you to make an indicative decision on budget, and that will then be subject to a consultation process, with the final budget being set in February. So at this moment in time, it's an information report, but obviously further work will be carrying on now from here to actually look at how we will achieve a sensible outcome to the budget construction when we get to December. The other thing we will be doing is we will be seeking to engage with our funding partners in the 10 local authorities to ensure that we meet with them and give them the opportunity to understand the budget, and we can obviously take any points or questions from them in terms of where our budget is going for the next financial year and beyond. At that point, Chair, I'll stop talking and offer members questions.
Thank you, Chris, for that. I did have a question for you, but you've answered my question when I said that I communicated with the 10 local authorities, because I think that is a must. With their budgets are really tight as well. It's a must for us. I just hope that all the 10 authorities will take the offer up to meet with myself, you, Chris, and the Chief Fire Officer to explain when we need to go to them, to explain why it's happening, whatever. Steve, can I bring you in, please? You're the chair of the Finance Committee.
It's only on page 58 on 4.1. We've got the decrease in budget 24-25 7.8. Is it going to be a larger figure following on from them 2 years because of the uncertainty?
It's difficult to say. The modelling that we do obviously is based on a number of assumptions, and one of the key assumptions there is the rate of inflation is got under control. We all saw the headline figures the other day where the release of information showed that inflation had stopped increasing and had marginally come down. But clearly it needs to come down more significantly if the general rate of inflation in the economy, and specifically pay awards, are going to follow it downwards as well. At the moment, the assumptions that we've made in future years for pay are around 3%. And then falling back to normal levels of 1.5% to 2% beyond that. Whether those are realistic, we will continue to monitor in the light of what headlines are doing across the economy in general.
As I say, there's a lot of uncertainty. I don't envy your job. It's very, very difficult to try and work out what's in the future. Thank you for that.
Okay. Good, Dan. I've been Dan.
Oh yeah, thanks, Chair. And thanks, Chris, for a really interesting report. My only question is obviously on the reserve levels. I do appreciate, obviously, reserves are a finance resource. Once you use them, you can't use them again. They need to be kept, obviously, for emergency situations. But obviously, on the general reserve, there's obviously a 3 million reserve there. And obviously, we are going through obviously a significant cost of living crisis with obviously a lot of pay pressures due to that, and obviously goods we use as a service have gone up a lot because of inflation, the highest inflation the last few years we've had probably in my lifetime. So it might be argued that right now is a significant pressure and kind of a rainy day. Has the service looked and compared to what other services reserves are? Could potentially a review could be seen if a small section of reserve could be used potentially. Nowhere near the whole reserve, but a small amount of it to help relieve pressure on obviously on the budget as a whole. Could that be looked into?
Yeah, I think that was the crux of the scrutiny question, really, which is, you know, what reserves have we got more generally, and what could and couldn't be used, and when. The reserve, the general balances reserve, was set in respect of the SIP for Financial Management Code. There is no prescriptive level of reserves. It equates to about 3.4% of the revenue budget. You'll hear various figures banded around 5% being a realistic level or not. But the key point is, when we set the reserve strategy originally some years ago, we set that in relation to the sorts of challenges that the fire authority might encounter, and particularly things like a prolonged period of industrial action and this type of activity. And therefore the £3 million that was set because that was the nature of the cost that we were looking at that time. Now, I'm not suggesting for 1 minute we are sort of immediately faced with a period of industrial action, but clearly there is significant issue in the economy more generally around the level of pay awards and things. So industrial action is not something that is completely off the table. So I think we would have to look at that issue in the round when setting the budget across all of the reserves that we've got to decide whether it is a sensible action. And I think there would have to be a plan then to deal with that going forward if we were going to go down that route, to actually restabilise the position after that. But I think what I'm saying is not an absolute no, but I think it has to be done in terms of a plan. It can't just be well, let's throw some money in to reduce the increase, and then we'll worry about that following year.
And then Martin.
Thank you. I'm mindful, Chair, of my leader signing a letter, being the signatory of a letter last year. So I met up with him last week, and I'm meeting with him next week to discuss the budget. And I've already spoken to Chris for any help he can give me on that thing before three of you go into the meeting.
Thank you, Ms. Jen. Martin?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, as one of the scrutiny members who asked for this additional information, I'd like to thank Chris for that. And you know, on reflection, I think it doesn't provide us with many opportunities or rooms for manoeuvre, so to speak. And just to highlight the point that Chris did make earlier, that the £340,000 cultural is only for the review itself. And it's not for implementing the recommendations, which we also need to take into account in future budgeting. So thank you for that information. It's very useful.
Any other member got a question? Look at the screen. My eyes are not very good. I can't see. There's nobody else. Can't see anybody up there. Any other questions? Nope. Okay, then, some members. The recommendation is that members note the risks and uncertainties of the projections of the approved strategy on the basis of financial planning over the next period. Is everybody happy with that report, please?
Yeah.
Everybody happy?
Yeah.
Yep. Okay, thank you very much. So the next item on the agenda, which is page 8, on page 81. I believe the chief has taken this principal officer vacancy.
I think Alison.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. So this report seeks Fire Authority approval to recruit an Assistant Chief Fire Officer. As the report outlines, it's the authority's decision to approve the recruitment of any principal officer vacancy. Following the retirement this month of the permanent post holder of technical services, the report seeks your approval to recruit a replacement. A timeline is presented within the report at paragraph 2.5, which, as you all see, culminates in the appointment of an Assistant Chief Officer appointment towards the end of this year. So I'd welcome your feedback on that timeline in particular. And in terms of the Fire Authority appointment panel, the proposal is that the chair and deputy chair of each of the current committees sit on that approval panel. One final thing to mention, I did spot a typographical error in the salary level. The ACFO salary is 118,201, 118,201. Apologies for that.
Thank you. Remember, want to come in on this? Ian, do you want to say something? Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And the only thing I would like to say, we've spent £340,000 on a cultural review. We still don't know what will come out from it. My personal opinion is I think we should wait till the review is concluded prior to running this process, because recommendations, if there's no recommendations come from the cultural review, it won't affect how we recruit an assistant chief fire officer. It may be recommendations which do affect how we recruit an assistant chief fire officer. So for the sake of 2.5 months, wait until after Christmas, I think we should postpone till the review is concluded and we've got the recommendations for permanently filling the post.
I was going to say, members, they'll be postponing for a month. I agree with what you're saying, Ian, but I say we agree we've got to get an assistant chief. But I was going to say, can we not postpone it that long? Can we start the process a bit later than what's in the thing, so we can get an appointment, say, in January? I think that would be better for us.
December is difficult.
December is quite a difficult thing for us for appointments for meetings and everything. So could we leave this for the, if we do go start the process, could we do the appointment in January or mid-January? I think that would be better for everybody.
Hi. Yeah, thank you, Chair. My thinking is, if we are going to postpone the appointment, wouldn't it be best to postpone until the first meeting back for Fire Authority's had to look at the answers to the cultural review? So I don't know if a Saturday that would be postponing it for a month or 3 months, but until, as Ian said, the response is fully known. Because if we are going to take this and to delay it, I think we need to then know, obviously, are we going to amend the process we do with recruitment? Because that might be one of the recommendations made potentially.
If I could just come back to your response to me, if we're only going to delay the process by a month and start it prior to the outcome of the cultural review, you might as well start it on this timeline, because you're still starting the process prior to us getting the results of the cultural review. So delaying it by a month, I don't think anything. We either start it straight away or we wait till after the.
It's not my decision, it's you as authority members' decision. So can we have a proposal, Ian, and have we got a seconder for that?
I propose we wait till we've got the results of the cultural review before we start the process to permanently fill the ACF post.
We have a seconder for that, please. Dan?
I'm happy to second that.
Okay, are members content with? I think I'll take it to a vote. So I would go through a call on this, please. So to postpone, so what you're saying, Ian, is to postpone it until after the cultural review?
Start the whole process after we know what we're facing with the cultural review.
Then.
When is the cultural?
In December, yeah. Do you want to come in on this, please, before you talk the thing?
So Diolch, Chair. Morning, members. So the anticipated timeline for the reporting of the independent culture review is still anticipated that they will report their final conclusions and recommendations in December by the end of this calendar year. I guess the proposal is to amend this timetable so it reflects commencing in the new year, or subject to any amendments or proposals that are made as part of the culture review outcomes and recommendations.
I thought I'd said it in those words, but it's, yeah, I know that the cultural review was out before Christmas, and then you can run this process start in January, February, whatever suits you.
Check, can I just check for clarity? So in terms of the recommendations, are members happy to accept the 5.1, the first recommendations that we approve the filling of the post on a permanent basis? It's just 5.2, then the timeline. You want to do a vote on amending the timeline for the recruitment process?
Yes. Yeah, 5.1. Members approve the filling of the post of the ACFO Technical Services, and then on 5.2, we postpone it until after the cultural review. With that, Ian?
Yes, yeah.
So these are the recommendations to make sure we got this correct now. So 5.1, that members approve the filling of the post of ACF Technical Services on a permanent basis. Everybody's in agreement with that. Okay, brilliant. So 5.2, the members agreed to postpone the process until after the cultural review. Is everybody happy with that or not? I will take a call on this one. So, Councillor Morgan?
Go with 5.2. Change it.
Right. So, Paul Ford?
Sorry. Yeah, I would like to change it to the after Christmas.
Thank you. So Martin Hughes?
For the amendment.
Aylesbury? The Hussey? Councillor Kerry Wright?
For the amendment, thank you.
Councillor Dilwar Ali?
For the amendment, Chair, thank you.
Councillor Kate Carr?
For the amendment.
Councillor Sue Melbourne? Councillor Dan Norton?
For the amendment.
Councillor Bethan Proctor?
For the amendment.
Councillor Isaac has given his apologies. Powell?
5.2 as it is written.
Is it written? All right.
For the amendment.
Yep. Okay, I can see you. I can see you saying yes. Yeah. Miktad?
Yeah, for.
Councillor Watkins? The Holmes?
Yes, agreed.
Roberts? The Georgina Williams?
For the amendment.
Alfie Best?
For the amendment.
Steve Evans?
I'll go with 5.2.
Councillor Ian Buckley?
The amendment.
Drake?
For 5.2 with your change to the date to January.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, members. That's carried to change the date of the appointment of the Assistant Chief Fire Officer. Okay. Go on to page 85, agenda 6.3. Her Majesty, I keep on saying Her Majesty's, it's really hard to get. His Majesty the Inspector of Constabulary and Fire and Rescue on page 85. I believe that's you, the Chief.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, Board of Dar members. This paper seeks to introduce a review that was commenced and delivered by His Majesty's Inspector of Constabulary for Fire and Rescue Services, actually known as HMIC FRS, and it is an English report. And it reviewed the English Fire and Rescue Services around their values and culture. The report was issued by HMIC FRS earlier this year, March, and Welsh Government have already expressed and communicated with us their expectation, whilst it is an English-based review, that we, as 3 Welsh Fire and Rescue Services in Wales, adopt the recommendations and comply with them fully as well. Also requested a periodic update from the service to their fire advisor also. The inspector goes on to say that while some progress has been made around culture and values across the English Fire and Rescue Service, it is clear that much more needs to be done. Some services need to get better at promoting positive professional cultures, improve equality, diversity and inclusion, and that opportunities for staff are not always equal, which may hinder potential for greater diversity throughout the services leadership team. Members that will know that as a service, we take the culture, values, equality and diversity as a service extremely seriously and important. And as you will know, in December last year, I moved to an independent culture review of our culture, historic discipline cases and the services discipline processes. And as we just heard, we're anticipating that will report on its recommendations and findings by the conclusion of December this calendar year as well. HMIC report makes 35 recommendations. The 35 recommendations span many stakeholders. There are 19 of the recommendations that are owned by each and every Chief Fire Officer across the UK. There are other recommendations that fall on government, fall on the employers, and fall on the Fire Standards Board and others as well. Recommendations basically fall into 9 areas. So raising concerns, and these 9 areas are in paragraph 2.4 in the paper for members to follow. They are raising concerns regarding background checks, misconduct handling, leadership, management and leadership training and development, diversity data, improving diversity, core code of ethics, and the Fire and Rescue Service National Framework for England. There is a national framework for Wales, and that's been in existence since 2016. So each of the recommendations, as members will see from the report, and the hyperlink is at the bottom of the paper, the recommendations, all 35 recommendations are in Appendix 1 for members to see. Each of the recommendations have got different timescales and different timeframes allocated to them for work to commence and for them to be delivered. But as a service, a lot of work that we are channeling through this is through our Equality, Diversity and Inclusion group that meets regularly. And I've asked the Deputy Chief Fire Officer to lead on this specific work to draw many aspects of this together as a service and report back to Welsh Government. I can say there are significant progress in place, and there's a significant amount of work across the service already happening to deliver the recommendations that are incumbent on us within this piece of inspection work that's been done by HMIC for us. And that's been done in advance of anything that the cultural report and review will come out with at the end of the year. There has been already a significant change in legislation. So the Rehabilitation of Offenders Act has changes our position as an employer within that piece of legislation. And I know the HR teams across Wales, we're looking for a common approach in Wales, are reviewing that on what level of vetting that we can ask when people look to join the service. As a service, we made a decision probably 6 or 7 years ago that we were employing a basic check. So staff have joined they've not joined without any checks. They have been basic checked. But this piece of legislation changes that. And there's a whole new scale on which we can ask for vetting for personnel joining the service. There are 3 recommendations, members at the bottom of the paper. First recommendation 4.1 is that the Fire Authority should accept the recommendations allocated to the Chief Fire Officer. Second recommendation 4.2 is that the service fully engage and support delivery of the remaining recommendations. And the third recommendation at bullet point 4.3 is that the actions and progress against HMIC FRS recommendations are presented to the November scrutiny group by the Deputy Chief Fire Officer. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Chief, for that. Any questions? Martin?
Yes, I'm happy to move this recommendation, but I would just like to focus on paragraph 3.2.1 about the associated additional costs coming from additional budget. But what the narrative also says is that where this isn't possible, growth bids will be submitted, which presumably would be to the Welsh Government. I wonder, how likely is that to be forthcoming, given the financial pressures that the Welsh Government have announced? And indeed, have they made any announcements in respect of possible funding for this particular initiative?
There's been no there's been no allocated funding from Welsh Government from it. The enhanced check-in through DBS and the Rehabilitation Offenders Act, that will come at a cost. We are, where we can identify the cost of the work that's ongoing, that would have gone into, as Chris has already presented to members, any budget building that we're looking at for 24-25. But there's been no specific allocation of additional resources or funding to discharge any of the recommendations within this report.
So as a follow-up then, Chair, how is that going to be expedited? Who is going to make that request to Welsh Government?
I think, Chair, what we need to do is work through the timetable and the action plan that we've got and identify any additional costs or resources that we may be required. And then we would need to have a conversation with yourselves as a fire authority and or pursue any additional funding that may or may not be available through other avenues such as Welsh Government. But I wouldn't be that optimistic in additional funding coming forward. As the first paper presented, it's a very difficult financial climate for all of us, but this is a priority for us. It's around our culture and it's about our values and it's about inclusivity and it's about having a safe and a psychologically safe workplace for all staff. So it is a top priority for all of us.
I think, Chair, it's worth reminding members of the commentary that Welsh Government made when they cut the airways monies last year, which is they saw that cost as part of the operational cost of running a fire service, and I suspect they would see these costs in the same way. So I would doubt that there would be additional money on the table, but if you don't ask, you don't get.
Yeah. My thoughts were that representations ought to be made collectively, with 3 FRAs at this stage, but
I think you've got a valid point there for the 3 of us together. We'll speak to the other 2 chiefs to see if we can put something into Welsh Government to say these are extra costs. What are you're looking at for us?
Absolutely, we're in constant contact with Welsh Government Fire Branch, particularly as well. And I know Alison through the rest of the other 2 HR teams as well are stepping through this. And if there is a collective view, and that's why we'd like to have a Welsh approach, particularly on the Rehabilitation of Offenders Act. As well, because we have transferability of staff, etc., and we work across borders as well. So that work is ongoing, and we look to bring that to a successful conclusion in the next few months. But anything that we can collectively and collaboratively bid on, we certainly will.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any other member got any questions? Green? Nope. So the recommendations on 4 is 4.1 that the chief fire officer, that the fire authority should accept the recommendations allocated to the chief fire officer. 4.2, South West Fire and Rescue Service fully engage and support the delivery of the remaining recommendations. On 4.3, that the actions and the progress against HMICFS recommendations are presented to the November scrutiny meeting. Can I have a second for that, please?
Yeah.
Okay. Brilliant. Thank you all members for that. On to page 95 for members, officers and staff, please leave the meeting.
Oh.
Sorry, members of the delay, but waiting for the advisor to come into the room so we can do this report. In here.
He's really operated in that post for a while, hasn't he?
Let's see what he is. Sorry. If I get outside.
Okay.
Yes. Okay, welcome, Mr. Fry. Welcome to our meeting. You're on the report now for the independent review of the principal officer's rumination. So over to you if you can explain everything to us, and I'm sure our members will have plenty of questions for you.
Okay, thank you very much. Good morning, one and all. It's a pleasure to be back here in South Wales. I remember my last year, I think, was on the hottest day of the year, that heat wave we had. So today was in terms of the travelling conditions. Anyway, it's my job to talk you through the report and to give you an opportunity to ask questions and raise issues with me as you see fit. Whether you want to hold fire until I've walked through.
I think so. Well, you do the report and then we can have questions afterwards, please, if possible.
Yes, indeed. Okay, let's make a start then. I'll skip lightly over the introduction because you saw me last year, most of you, I'm sure. You'll know about the work that my business does all on behalf of customers like yourselves. So I'd like to move to the requirement for this particular piece of work, which is on page 3 at item 2. And here we have 5 key strands of activity, 5 key strands of work that we were asked to complete for the Fire and Rescue Authority. So let's start there then and go through those 5 pieces of work. The first and the most obvious in many ways was to assess pay for your chief fire officer, because that's the linchpin salary benchmarking, because it has ramifications for pay for all the other senior principal officers at the Fire and Rescue Service. So that was the first piece of work we had to do. Now let's just dwell on that a bit, because I'd like to refer you to tables as I go through the report, because a lot of the information is summarised there. So here then, in order to assess pay this year, we were lucky enough really to be provided with data that is collected, analysed and held by the Local Government Association. And that information was made available to us. And within that of data, we were able to extract relevant comparator data from other fire and rescue services, a similar size and level of complexity as you have here in South Wales. And the way they do that is to categorise each of the fire and rescue services for which they calculate, which is all the fire and rescue services across England and Wales, but they then break it down into scale, so that South Wales is brigaded with other sized fire and rescue services into what we know as band 4. That's the second highest banding there is. There are 11 constituent members in total, of which South Wales Fire and Rescue Service is 1. The only exception that sits above everything on its own is London. So that's in band 5. You're in band 4. And for example, Mid and West Wales Fire and Rescue Authority would be in band 3. And that's because you're a larger entity than they are. You've got a wider population to serve. You have far more employees. You have a larger budget, which follows those things. So we've been able to compare pay across organisations that have been similarly brigaded into band 4 like yourselves. And if I could just take you through to table 1 then quickly on page 4, you'll see that the current pay, as we started, for the Chief Fire Officer was 157,287. The next column, you'll see our proposed base pay, and this is on data that I've just been referring to, and that comes out at 169,574. And that represents the average pay for a Chief Fire Officer in population band 4, which is the banding you're actually in. Now, in order to reach that figure, because there's always a lag between the period that any pay data represents and the date the LGA releases that data and publishes it. So the pay data was captured on 2 separate dates. It was on the 31st of March 2001, and then again on the 31st of March 2002. The publication of that data was actually made in July of this year. That I think, well, therefore it's out of date. There's always a built-in sort of delay with these things, but sensibly we're able to say, okay, so what's happened to pay of Chief Fire Officers in that time? And we were able to upgrade that number by 3.5% to reflect the pay increase set by the Joint National Council for Brigade Managers at the beginning of this year. So we're able to be confident, although the original data provided, you could say, well, there's a built-in obsolescence. Yes, there is, but we know what's happened to it since, and we're able to apply that number to bring it up to its current standing. So the 169,574 is the average pay as revalorised by the last increase of 3.5% in January of this year. And then, of course, once we've got to that position, you can see everything else then falls behind it, because there's the formulaic link between pay established for the Chief Fire Officer and the rest of the team of your principal. And that's what the numbers look like. So only real calculation was done against the CFO. The rest simply fell in line behind it. So there's no meddling with that. That's why. So that's where we are with the Chief's pay. Soundly based, in my view, on comparator pay data. And that's what that comparator pay data looks like and tells us. We've simply taken the average of pay data. And that's what produces.
Yes, Martin, yes, yeah.
Just a point of clarification, really. So I'm trying to determine the actual date of this report, that in the narrative is given as the January 2022, but obviously that's not the case because you've taken into account what happened in January. When was this report actually published? Have you got that date?
July of this year.
July of this year.
Yeah, so
sorry, I thought it was switched off. I do apologise.
That's fine. That's all the clarification was. Thank you.
That was as it was immediate for us to get that data at that time. And it referred to date captured, the dates captured well in the year beforehand, and the starting point was the year before that.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
Then necessarily, I think, uprated it, because that 3.5% would have been applied to all the constituent members of that band 4, as it was across the piece.
Yeah, it's just a matter of reference. That if somewhere in the report it could be stated this, the date of this report is July 2023. It'll avoid any.
Yeah, I've dated it. Now, you know, I've actually dated the report. I think you're referring to the released by the local government association. That date was released in July 2023.
All right.
Okay. So that leads me then on to the second strand of work. And this really was a piece of housekeeping. It wasn't an attempt to reset pay or to do any further pay calculations in any meaningful way, but simply to look at the current arrangement whereby pay is linked to pay of the Chief Fire Officer for the other principal officers. And as you can see in the second column of table 2 on page 5, it will talk about the current pay matrix. You'll see it's not quite straightforward as it might be, even though the determinations are fine. There's no worries with that. All I've simply attempted to do in the third column, you'll see, tidy, has no meaningful impact on pay whatsoever. It's simply a way of stating the relationship between pay of your principal officers compared with the Chief Fire Officer. Therefore, everything links to the Chief Fire Officer's pay by virtue of an agreed percentage link, but it's just been worked across rather than, you know, taking the Assistant Chief Fire Officer 75.15 of the Chief Fire Officer, ACO 82.5% of the ACF. It's just tidying. Yep. Nothing more significant than that. So if I can then move swiftly on to the third stream of work, here there's a bit more to it. We were asked to review and make recommendations on a sustainable, sensible approach to pay for corporate heads of service, with a view to looking at the relationship between area managers as heads of service, uniformed for, if you like, comparing them with the non-uniformed for as heads of service, corporate heads of service. And I did get a chance to look at the job descriptions. My colleague and I looked at using our job evaluation scheme called JESS, and we were taking into account particularly the strategic nature of the work that both of officer carry out, in other words, the uniformed folk and the non-uniformed for, and the way in which they support the officers to do their work. It's a large similarity. Now, the jobs aren't identical, but job evaluation doesn't demand that they are. It's looking at the nature of the work and the demands that are made on those posts. And I will accept here, for example, that area managers are uniformed and therefore they receive certain allowances for different types of working conditions. And of course, they stand ready to attend or serious incidents and everything else. But the nature of their leadership role is very similar in terms of the work carried out as their role as being the head of a certain area of work. It's very similar between both uniformed and non-uniformed work. So we were quite content to come to the conclusion that base pay level, not entire pay level, because clearly that's not the case, but at base pay level, there should be parity between those uniformed and non-uniformed officers. And we came to a way of dealing with that, which you can see at table 3 on page 6. The area managers have base pay of 69,283. So we're simply proposing here that the base pay of corporate heads of service, non-uniformed, see their pay aligned with pay at base pay level, with pay for the area managers. So that would entail that an increase of 7,229 on the current base pay of corporate heads of service, non-uniformed, 62,054. So to bring them into parity, they would get a pay rise of 7,000, just over 7,000, 11.65%.
Can I ask a question, please? On that point for non-uniformed staff who will head of service, they attend SLT meetings, they're virtually on the same level grades then as an area manager. So that's what you were saying for the parity of pay.
The type of work, the considerative work that they do, the strategic nature of their work. I mean, let me give you a very quick example. It's one that I was thinking through. You've got 4 non-uniformed heads of service, 4 uniformed heads of service. In fact, we can call them area managers quite rightly, no problem with that. If we take, for example, someone who might be head of service for IT, quite likely in their role, unless an ACO above them has experience and knowledge of leading an IT function, it's quite likely, for example, that head of service will actually lead the function as being, you know, in inverted commas, top of the shop. There's no one above them with that particular skill. So that is just an example of this considerative nature, that type of work. Whereas you might argue on the other side of the fence, the area managers, it's more likely that their superiors in the principal officer ranks, like ACFOs, will have relevant experience of the sorts of work that they're doing, and there could be good reference points to support them. Arguably, the IT person would be out on their own. Would have to go outside your organisation to seek that sort of support. So that's just the nature of how job evaluation can work, and take certain types of issues and demands in job and come to sensible arrangements about what that job weight looks like. And that's why we think that the argument for parity is fair and reasonable. So what we're saying here, the 4 non-uniformed service are linked to pay the ACOs by formulaic link. We're saying we recommend scrap that, decouple that linkage, but create a new link that simply says link pay of heads of service, corporate heads of service, non-uniformed, to the base pay uniformed area managers. Of course, and then their pay would become set by the grade book terms and conditions in the way that the area managers currently have. So there would just be that equivalence. So it's a different, the linkage is still there, but it's a different one. That's what. Sorry.
Yes, you said the area manager has to be is uniformed.
So I think that's how you have
and
it.
Yet the corporate head of service isn't uniform. No. But surely they're not on a par really, because the uniform one's got to pay for the uniform and the other one hasn't. Why are you levelling them up?
Sorry, I have to do what for the uniform?
Do they pay for their uniform?
No.
Oh, that's right. Then. Yeah,
I'm not aware of that.
Yeah, that's answered my question. Thank you.
And in fairness, I didn't take that into account. I was unaware of that. So
yeah.
I got Dan, question.
Okay.
Yeah, so I asked this obviously of a scrutiny group. I think you mentioned then obviously for work you've done, just looks for job description, so it doesn't obviously look at the numbers of people potentially a team area managers / head of service managers, and obviously go into further details about the job. My question here is, would it be maybe looking before we make any recommendations to level up, which I'm not against in principle, to do a more in-depth look, so interviewing area managers and the service heads to get more of an idea what they actually do day to day, because job descriptions are great, but I think just on its own that might not give you for actual what someone actually does to I think the level to actually potentially change people's salaries quite significantly.
Okay, I hear what you're saying there, Daniel. I would have no objection to doing a more thorough investigation, but I also understand that the job descriptions I was looking at for the heads of service, they're not the same jobs either. You've got, as I say, you've got the head of IT, you've got the head of finance, there's the head of human resources, and a head of communication and performance and communication. So they're 4 disparate jobs. They would, fairly sure, if they were job evaluated, within a reasonable touch of each other. There are differences. And similarly, on the uniform side, my understanding is that the 4 jobs, that they don't all do the same thing. It's not one job separated out, divided by 4 because it's such a big patch or whatever. I do believe that some job description, you know, if you did an individual job description, they would not be identical. Some would have a larger management component, some would have a larger strategic component, I think. But that's not to say that the work that Daniel's suggesting there couldn't be done.
Yeah.
In the medium-term financial thing we went through earlier, it said that a job evaluation was done of all non-uniform staff. It's Green Book, but if anyone's not sure, job evaluation was done on all levels of it, and they were awarded a 7% pay rise. So are you saying this 11.6% pay rise is on top of the 7%?
It's the amount required. If you accept the proposition, they should be ranked on base pay. The heads of service, the 4 job holders as heads of service non-uniformed, would have their base pay aligned to the base pay of area managers because of that similarity of, particularly of the strategic and demanding elements of the roles that they carry out. If you think that has credence, then I think there's a strong argument for saying that they should be balanced against one another.
So could we look at the last job evaluation then, because every level might be 11% under pay awarded, because it's gone through, imagine the rep bodies, and it's gone through the staff on.
Take your point. So this was a wider job evaluation exercise. Was that carried out last year or something?
No, it's in the MTFS that we signed off earlier today on page 52.4.3.
I'm just not cited on that. I can't give you a categorical answer because I simply don't have the information to do that.
Do you want to come in?
Yeah, I mean, this is the second independent review that we've had. We had one last September. This has been discussed at the HR committee, and here, if members feel that a further report is needed, but bear in mind, this is not, well, this is posts here, and if you think that we need a further report, then so be it. I honestly believe we've had enough discussions on this. We know where we're going, we know budgets, and if we need to keep the best candidates and the retention of valued staff, then we really need to get a move on with this.
Dan?
Yeah, I'm not, sorry, just to clarify, Chair, I'm not actually asking for us to do another report. I was just asking us to do the same kind of work we did for obviously the non-uniformed staff when we did significantly change some people's pay. Some went up, some went down. We obviously did interviews of employees. We looked at the role in a very deep dive way to get confidence of the employees. Because looking at the 4 area managers, if if you go to the 11.5% pay rise, for example, would be just to match. So that would be with them having no pay rise at all. And then obviously the for heads of services again at 11.5% pay rise. Potentially it will be higher if you want if you were going to give the area managers a pay rise as well. Obviously then you would have a higher pay rise to match to make it equal. I guess from before you do any work around going to that much detail, that much change, I think potentially interviewing members who are affected, obviously trying to get more information around the roles, I think is personally probably the way you go before you make that decision. I'm not saying another report, I'm just saying for the same kind of process we've done for junior level staff should really happen here because it is a major change.
Okay, well, thank you for that point, Daniel. And I hear what you're saying. Can I just make one point clear, which I think that I should have made clear to you? There is no suggestion here a pay rise should be withheld from the area managers. Their pay is set by the Grey Book terms and conditions. I'm not looking to interfere with that in any way, shape or form. So, your point there about we're saying they should not get a pay rise is not the case. All we're saying here is that the 4 non-uniformed heads of service should have their pay raised to
it should be parity with, especially like for like what they're doing, and because they're the SLT team. Yep, I get that. Yeah.
What you're saying, they're specialised and they need to be aligned with the rest.
That's all we're saying. But we're not trying to, you know, there's no suggestion here there should be a pay freeze or you know, we are not looking to interfere with the annual settlement that's, you know, put forward by the NJNC for, the Grey Book T's and C's that determines pay for area managers. We're not saying anything about it.
Right. Okay. Yep.
But going back to Daniel's wider point about the work on job evaluation, that of course matter for the organisation to commission. We're available to do anything like that, but you know, it's not been asked of me at this point. Okay. Okay, thank you. If I could move then swiftly on, I realise it's a reasonably lengthy report. The fourth strand of work was to come up with some benchmarking and a recommendation on pay for your treasurer. Your treasurer, of course, unlike the principal officers we're talking about in this report, does not belong in the team of principal officers. It's someone you employ as a fire authority directly, and therefore that is not a post that belongs in the fire and rescue service. You know that, I get that. So what we did here was to say, what you require of a competent treasurer, someone with wherewithal, depth of experience and qualification to sign off accounts. The authority of a Section 151 officer. In other words, they sign off in their name that the accounts are true, proper and fit for purpose. You need a senior accountancy professional. That's taking that as a starting point. We looked at salaries for that a person of that qualification and standing in the South Wales area, and we came up with the recommendation there that the pay amounted to 79,788 full-time equivalent, and I realise this person's part-time, so you wouldn't be spending that much on the individual, but they would get that on a prorated basis to the extent that you require them, but it's a part-time job. But had it been full-time, it would amount to 79,788 would be what Cronin Reward, the providers of the database that we're able to access, were suggesting for that type of individual. Financial skills and qualifications and a depth of experience required to be your treasurer.
Can I stop you a second? I can see a hand up on the screen, but I don't know who it is.
Councillor Ellsbury it is, Chair.
Oh, Colin, right, I can't see from all this back. Colin, do you want to come in?
Can see from there.
Yeah, sorry, I don't know if I'm, can you hear me, by the way?
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, I don't know if I'm preempting what the gentleman was going to say. First of all, thank you very much for a very, very detailed report. But we appear, our chief fire officer seems to be behind Mid and West Wales's and North Wales's, yet we have more employees, a greater population and a greater budget. Would I be right in saying that?
I think historically, in times past, that would be the case. Don't believe that is currently the case. Maybe something similar to in West Wales. The recommendation, of course, is to pay your chief fire officer at a level that would be higher. The chief fire officer of Mid and West Wales, because they're in that lower population band, and therefore their pay data captured in the same way. And I know a bit about West Wales because I did a similar piece of work for them. And your chief fire officer has a more demanding role by virtue of the scaling. There's no question about that. The bigger entity, you're a bigger business.
Yeah, that's my reading of it. Yeah, fine, thank you. I just wanted to clarify that because it does worry me that if we're not paying our staff enough, they're just going to move.
It's a risk. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much.
Welcome.
Thank you, Colin. Yep.
So we're recommending the current pay on a full-time equivalent basis is 69,118. So it would entail an increase of 15.43%. Sorry, I should have written that into the report, but it's 15.43 up on the current situation. But we think it makes perfect sense. You're employing the treasurer directly. I'm not so sure, therefore, you need a link to a band or a grade within the fire service itself. Doesn't seem to fit. Okay, so that then is strand 4. And strand 5 was simply for us to appraise or think about the pay differentials as they currently sit between the area managers and the principal officers. And it can be seen in table 4 that on the current standing, area managers' total pay, which would include their substantial allowances, and I've no comment about the allowances, that's fine, and that's set by national conditions. But they're coming out at 94,779. ACOs are at 97,515. And there was a feeling that there needed to be, perhaps, because the principal officers are director rank, there should be a step change from the heads of service, more pronounced than is currently catered for in these numbers. Should you implement the recommendations that we've put forward in this report to revalorize pay of your chief fire officer, what we're saying here is that you actually fix the issue, because the differential would increase from the current £2,000 to 736, which is 2.89% of the differential, would escalate up to a differential of £10,357, which is pushing towards 10% at 9.86. And therefore, you could argue job done. If on the other hand, decide as a body that you don't want anything to do with this, you'll keep things as they are, what we're saying here is you might want to be mindful of how we address, I think, is giving rise to some concern about the lack of a differential between those two levels, i.e. area managers and principal officers as directors. That really is the final point. Try to summarise everything at paragraph 8 on page 7, just to see these are the 5 recommendations we're making. So, you know, to raise pay of CFO to 169,574, adopt the new pay matrix because it's sensible housekeeping, but there's no pay implication really on that. Align the just and align the pay of corporate heads of service to the base pay of area managers, and they would then, going forward, march in step year on year. Increase the pay of the treasurer to 79,788, full-time equivalent. It will be less than that because you don't need a full year out of them. And then just to, should we not be able to endorse these findings for whatever reason, just to bear in mind the impact or the failure to impact the current situation, differentials between area managers and principal officers, on the other hand, have a very, very narrow gap between them, and the implications that brings for career development and so on and so forth. That's me. Thank you. Questions?
Any more questions, please? Right, before your committee you've spoken, do you want to say some on it? It came before your committee.
With step up on table 4 that you've just referred to, from area manager to ACO. It's not a step that would be made though, because an ACO is non-uniform. So yeah, step up from area manager is to ACFO, which is £24,000, not the 3,000.
I do take that point. The typical progression for a uniformed body would be to move from area manager to an assistant chief officer.
Yeah.
Is that though an absolute? What if someone in lifestyle terms wanted a change? Whatever reason, for you know, they might want to take a job that doesn't entail so much
They're 2 different jobs, there. It's grey book and green book, and it is uniform and non-uniform. So they could
thinking more at the individual level. It'd be possible for a uniformed officer to say, I don't want to work these irregular hours going forward. I quite like the proposition of having a more Monday to Friday 9 to 5, if I can put that in crude terms.
They could retire or resign their uniform post and then take a non-uniform post.
Yeah, but they would still be stepping up to the rank of director.
Yeah, I am right to think, guys. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
What was the,
Sorry, yeah, go on.
I do accept it's possibly not that common, but should that be the barrier, if you see what I mean? Or should someone say, actually, like in lifestyle terms, would prefer to do that?
Yeah.
Do you want to come in on this now?
I think, you know, the report is quite full. I think we just need as members now to discuss this further between ourselves, and you know, there are obviously questions to be asked on this report. Various members, they would prefer to do it in this forum. Without.
Well, to you. Yes.
Would you like me to retire?
If you would, yeah, we call you back, yes, or whatever.
Yes, yes, I'll make myself available.
Okay, yes, brilliant. Thank you so much. Yes, yeah.
Yes. Say earlier.
Isn't it getting makes sense?
Yes, crazy, isn't it?
Okay, members. Okay, so up to you, members. You ask questions or discuss anything or whatever. Ian, go on.
If you take the recommendations one at a time to increase the chief's pay, regardless who's the chief, if it's the current one or if it's the next one, increase it £30,000, which equates to almost 25% per year. We're leaving ourselves wide open for some severe criticism in there. The pay thing, I can see what you said, and I do agree with what Colin said. I think the chief shouldn't be paid less than the chief of North Wales or Mid and West Wales. I'm not disputing that he's worth £169,000. What I'm saying is I don't think the award of 25% is justifiable and climate. The matrix thing where they want to simplify it, I think that makes perfect sense, and I suppose we haven't looked at that previously. Aligning area managers to corporate heads of service, not quite the same jobs. I know they're different, but if you don't align them the full 11%, job evaluation was done this year on the non-uniform staff, and they had a 7% pay rise. Given the additional 11%, do we have to look at the 11% that maybe every Greenbrook staff could have had? Because they're saying that the job evaluation on the heads of service is incorrect. Are we saying that the job evaluation on everyone? Can you see what I can see where you're coming from? Yeah. And I'm not saying that I'm not saying that anyone's not worth it. I just don't know if we're opening up to that, because if you do the 11% pay rise for corporate heads of service, you then do have to up area managers one for the step differential. If you don't, the step differential is there. Sorry if I've confused my bits. And
Who's been over here? And yes. Steve, I'll bring Steve in a minute. He must have come and be here.
Yeah, if you remember when we first had these initial reports, all our chief officers were all out of alignment. And if you remember when we discussed it, we didn't give them the full implement.
Yeah.
So this is why it's come to fruition now, and that's why the percentage is higher. Unfortunately, we didn't align it this year on the first one. We left ourselves a gap. So that gap is now coming to these figures. If we don't do it, I think we're failing, because he's aligning himself regarding staff, how many people he represents, and all the functions that he's put in there. If we don't do that, we're really going to be suffering this next year if we don't give the full entitlement.
He's quite right. Steve's quite right. I mean, this was fetched to a committee at least 6 years ago, and we agreed then that over the years that we would try and bridge the gap for each other, which we've never done. And as he said, it's just storing up. If we don't start to address it, we're just storing up problems for ourselves over the coming years.
Yeah, and
Ron? Ron?
Oh, sorry, yeah, sorry, I didn't hear that. But yeah, thanks, Chair. I've got some views on this report. I think there's an issue with very high pay awards to senior staff as a whole, when obviously we are in a financial difficulties at the moment as a authority and a society. So I think we need to keep that in mind, particularly when obviously there may be talks obviously around potential industrial action over more junior level pay, and when that hasn't potentially gone up as much as we would have liked over the last decade and a half, due to obviously lower investment in public services. So I think we need to keep that in mind when it comes to the specific thing around obviously area managers' pay compared to for directors' pay. I think that we do need to look more in details around those roles, because I don't know if they are quite similar. because I think there is a lot of difference between responsibilities of obviously for Green Book staff and obviously Grey Books. I think they do need to be potentially looked into interview level depthness. I am concerned about making these changes just on job descriptions, which I don't think give enough detail to actually what a job entails. I think before you make any of these decisions, I think it needs to be more investigated, like we did with the junior staff. I think that went really well when we did that internal. So I would rather us to do that internal and give it more in-depth look via obviously speaking to the members potentially affected. When it jumps to the general, I think we're calling for what, over 7% pay rise. I think to do that in 1 year for the senior staff might be a bit too high. Maybe over a year, over a period of a couple of years, I think that might be something more achievable.
That's a bit. Ian, Adrian, you haven't spoken yet, Adrian. Sorry.
I know it's percentages and the increases are very high, but if this is going to bring us in line in the future, I think we should take the hurt now rather than put it off for next year or the year after. Let's just do it now and get it sorted, and then it'll be on an even keel.
Yeah. Adrian, second. I'll prepare a second then. If
hang on, Glenn. Hang on, we still haven't gone through discussions yet. Sorry, Colin.
I am actually, I am got my hand up. So, but no,
Yes. Oh no, sorry, it's Mick Sorry, Mick Sorry. Sorry.
Yeah. Thanks, Chair. Yeah. Looking at the recommendations and the presentation, and you made a very good presentation, Chair. I must admit, I feel very uncomfortable about going, with the full hog 25% increase on the chief officer pay in one go. He may be right about the comparability. I think he's given a good sort of argument on that. But if we are of a mind to accept it, how about staging it over 2 years? If we feel that that's how it should be. It's just that I think it will give the wrong headline with the way pay is going generally for public sector workers, that sort of thing. So I feel a little bit uncomfortable about agreeing that recommendation. Yeah, I've got no issue with recommendation recommendation C, which is the alignment. I thought he gave, again, a very good sort of justification for that. But then what I could not understand, I'm sorry, because my system switched off at this point as he was explaining the treasurer thing, which is recommendation D. I couldn't understand why he has then separated the treasurer from those heads of service, the corporate heads of service, because, recommending about 10K more there. Because, taking his example about the head of corporate IT or something, I would say the treasurer is similar to that, perhaps. So,
I think the reason for the treasurer, because the treasurer only works part-time.
Right. Sorry?
Treasurer only works part-time. He doesn't work a full 5 days a week.
I see, right. Yeah. Well, I'm taking the sort of the FTE really.
Yeah. Steve, do you want to come in?
Yeah, as I said previously, if we roll it onto a 2-year program, we're in exactly the same position next year. We're never going to clear the process. If we do it as Adrian has said now and do it all in one go, we are on a one level. Next year, we can look at it differently and not have to go back. But what we got to remember with the increase in 11%, for how many years the chief fire officer has had nothing? Nothing at all, no percent over how many years? So
I thought Sorry, I
understand
thought.
the level.
Excuse me, please. I don't want to over talking over another member. Please, Steve. Speak.
I understand 11%, but you break that down over 5 or 6 years. That is not even probably 2% a year. We have to be mindful. It's the position, and this is where we're at from the consultant who was a professional. Loads of other fire authorities telling us we need to really look at it and deal with it properly. And that's what, you know.
Right. Anybody else want to speak on this before? Yeah.
Can I just propose that we accept this and go ahead with it now? It'll be ready for next time, and it'll be clean cut then.
Yeah.
Ken?
Just wanted to say, it's not 11%, Steve, it's 25%.
Yes.
And if you did the chief a 10% pay rise, he'd be on a par with West Wales and North Wales. That's still going to cut. If you look on page 98, they got the total budget implications on a 7.8% pay rise. And because it goes down to the corporate service and the area managers, just under 8% equates to 80 grand. So if you're going in at 25%, that's going to be 250 grand. I haven't allowed for on the wage stuff in the medium-term financial strategy, which we signed off earlier. So I'm all in favour of putting it in line with Mid and West and North, and I'll go 100% with what the committee go. But I agree with the councillor there, a 25% pay increase. I think it's hard for us to justify. I can't find the
25%. I'm looking.
Going from 139,000 to 169,000 pounds. So 30 grand, you divide 139 roughly.
What page is that on, please, Ian?
Oh, he's done his own thing.
114.
114.
The recommendation A, it's
Yeah, but that report goes back to January 22, doesn't it?
Yes.
That was the issue. I think there's a bit of confusion here because of the.
I am confused now. I am confused on this one. Yes.
Look at on page 104, an increase is 12,287.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah. That's the line.
Next one we need to look at rather than appendix 2. This is just.
It's 106 page. It's 106 we need to look at, isn't it?
Yeah.
Martin?
Yeah, I made the proposals. I'm going to second it.
Hang on a minute. Hang on. Martin, what do you say, Martin, then?
No, I'm just emphasising that if you look at table 1 on page 104, it's the 7.81 that we're looking at.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that is on the average chief's pay, right? Our chief is not on 157,000 pound a year. He's on 139,000 pounds. For you to up his pay to 169,000 pound, which I'm not saying he doesn't deserve, but that's a 30,000 pound a year pay, which equates to almost 20%.
But as I said previously,
yes,
for how many years he never received any percentage.
I think we need to bring the advisor back in because I can't see was 25%, Avron, mentioned in your committee, please?
No.
Yeah, that's why I'm totally confused. Can you?
Yeah.
Might the gentleman ask the gentleman to come back in?
Chair, can I just say the dates Jane's looking is 2022. We're looking at 2023.
Yeah.
This is where I think
That's the point, I mean.
that's what Martin was saying.
Yeah, it's 2023 we're in.
Saying it Ian right, but it just
But we're not-
confusing. Yeah,
The date.
we're looking at 104.
Yeah.
To be seriously looked at, we won't be able to track good stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The good quality stuff for the future.
It is January 22.
The stay for.
Yeah.
So we're not on about 106, what they're saying.
We're all struggling with the chief executives.
169,000 pound.
Didn't increase last year.
Dan's gone.
4.4.
Yeah, I can see Dan's hand up. Yeah.
Double one. To them.
The system broke.
Yeah.
Like you said, it's gonna be anything. That's what he means. Yeah. But I think it changed. Voices down to the lower. How much rather? Yeah, so. I haven't got that involved. Give them 4 minutes.
Chair, can I have a quick comfort break? Sorry.
Yeah.
Hannah, have a quick comfort break a minute. Can we stop the recording for 5 minutes, please?
Right.
Thank you, everybody. The comfort break has gone. I could see some hands up on the screen. Before we come up with the members on the screen, gentlemen, it's been said that there'd be a 25% pay rise. Correct or not?
No, definitely incorrect. The increases are set out in the tables in the report. And for the body of principal officers, we're talking 7.81%. There is if we're going to equalise pay between the area managers and the non-uniformed heads of service, that element for 4 people would entail 11.65% of an increase. And for the treasurer, you might remember, if you adopt in principle or the proposition that we link pay to the external market, but for someone that you need as an employee of the Fire and Rescue Authority, i.e. not an employee of Fire and Rescue Service, the market level of pay would entail a 15.43 increase on rate of pay. So nothing like 25.
Sorry, if you could just clarify then, because on Appendix A, page 114, it says that the Chief Fire Officer of South Wales is paid £139,831 a year.
That was last year. That was a starting point last year before you applied the 4.5. That's historic now.
Yeah.
It's not current.
Right.
It was true then, yes, but not.
It's not now.
So,
Chair?
No, wait a minute, please.
You're going to say
Yeah.
4.5% of 130, well, let's call it 140 grand. Doesn't take you up to 157.
Yeah. Was there an increase that then rose pay?
Last year.
Yeah.
When
To 1. I was given that number to start this piece of work with. I was told it was 157, so I took that as read. I didn't come up with that number. I was given it. I assume it was double checked, but that was my starting.
Okay, so we don't know what the current salary is of the chief, do we?
It's 157. It should be in table 1.
157, 157, 287.
That number I was given as a starting point for this piece of work, so I had no reason to query it.
Okay.
I understand what you're saying, but if it's 157, that puts you in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Within the table of merit on Chief Fire Officer's pay. This is what we're trying to increase it to. I'm probably not understanding the figures.
Right, Dan, you want to come in, Dan?
No, my hand won't just go down. I apologise.
Okay, sorry, Don. Victor, did you want to say something?
Yes, Chair. I think you've asked it. What was the Chief Fire Officer paid this year? You know, because 157 compared to 139, that looks like, you know, far more than the 4.5%.
Yeah.
There must have been some, because there's two elements to pay on an annual basis. it
That's
says that.
correct, yes, yeah.
So we did apply, you applied 4.5 last year. I don't know whether additional, how it got to 157 from the 146 or whatever it became, 4.5%.
Chair.
Yeah.
Yes.
Can I-
Not there. Shouldn't we just go and ask Alison what the figures actually are at this point?
Yep, I go and ask now. Okay.
Thank you.
So you, Pam, carry on with it.
Rosie, look at him, look at Rosie.
David Morgan, see on the,
Not any gin and tonic left.
Drank all our yesterday during the match. But we couldn't play then Argentina. Does England in the semis?
Right. Okay, we would go.
Yeah.
Close it ended.
We can get to final.
Like, I went straight to bed after the result. And pinching myself in the middle of the night. It was like,
I think it's about the fun.
Yeah.
Very final.
It's almost the
And we could have
inevitable.
Ireland.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, well, yeah.
The pub is run by an Irish woman. Remember Jerry McLaughlin used to play for Ireland?
Yeah.
He played for Munster and for Ireland.
Yeah,
Jerry
definitely.
McLaughlin.
Yeah.
Your pub in Gilnach.
Oh, okay. All right. Go on, Bob.
So you can imagine when they beat South Africa.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you, members. I can clarify, I've been to the director of HR and the chief's pay is 157,287 as now today. Thank you.
As written down here.
Yes, as written in the report. Okay,
Got down on screen.
Dan, is it still a hand up there or not?
No, I think it's.
I think he's frozen now. Right. Can I have a recommendation? The recommendations are on 8.1,
Page 107.
on 107. On the basis of the evidence drawn from the work we carried out for the annual pay review South Wales, increased the chief pay officer to 169,547 per annual table 1. Adopt the new and simplified pay matrix table 2. C. Align and link these corporate heads of service to base pay area managers. See table 3. D. Increase the pay of the treasurer 79,788,000 equal to the part-time rata. And E. Consider the impact of the pay differential between area managers and principals officers recommended above is not adopted in full to table 4. Can I have a mover for those recommendations, please?
Seconded.
Okay. I will do a full roll call on this now, please. Councillor Morgan, are you for or against?
For.
Councillor Ford?
For.
Councillor Hughes? Councillor Ellsbury?
Or
Councillor Hussey?
Or
Councillor Wright?
For.
Councillor Ali?
In for.
Councillor Carr? Councillor Carr?
For.
Councillor Melbourne? Councillor Dan Norton? The Proctor,
For.
Councillor Isaac has apologised. Councillor Powell,
For.
Councillor Wright, I can see you. For, yes, I can see you nodding. You got no sound. Councillor Mittag,
Abstain, Chair.
okay. Councillor Watkins, Councillor Holmes,
Wholeheartedly for.
Councillor Roberts,
For.
Councillor Williams, Gina Williams, sorry,
For.
Councillor Best,
I'm for.
Councillor Evans,
For.
Councillor Buckley,
For.
Councillor Drake. Thank you. That's passed. Thank you ever so much. Thank you ever so much. We'll call the, I can get the other officers in next meeting.
Thank you for your time, everyone.
Thank you very much.
You see you again. Bye.
No, pleasure.
Thank you.
Sorry about that.
When you look at
It wasn't clear going off that chain. That's what- Appendix two. Yeah. We had another-
Data training. That was really good, isn't it?
Anyway.
June I've been married 42 years.
The thing is, you can't catch up. You can't do it.
18 years. Time.
So I know. Imagine how much percentage out in a year. It's only comparison, isn't it?
Okay then.
But yeah,
Everybody here, members, please.
Think so.
We're on to item 7, reports for information. Please, on 121.
Please.
Please.
Oh, we're lagging.
Still on holiday time.
Oh, I can talk people on.
Apologies. Thank you.
Okay, so this is the annual Treasury Management Review. It's the third of 3 statutory Treasury Management members throughout the year. So we have the strategy, which is the first report at the beginning of the financial year. We have a mid-term review, and this is the annual review, which is the year-end report. So it's a look back at the information that we set out in the strategy, and it compares that to the actual information or the finishing position for the financial year ending the 31st of March 2023. So the report goes on to talk about statutory and regulatory obligations, and then identifies effective treasury management as limiting impact on the budget. So that's where we can, minimising financing costs in the budget and maximising investment returns. It talks about cash flow management, which is key here, and about how we manage surplus and deficit cash, and how that features with the concept of solvency. And for members, what you'll be looking at when you look at our capital financing requirement, or CFR, We're looking at whether we're under or over borrowed, because tying in with the impact of solvency will be whether we are borrowing to fund our revenue activities. And as members know, our fire levy covers them off. That should not be the case. So that's a key indicator for members to review. It moves on the report to talk about the amount of money that's flowing through the accounts in any one year, about 90 million in excess. 8 million a month that go out, so managing those ins and outs is quite key. And then the financial implications, as mentioned, the borrowing and the investment return positions. So we've got a very competitive and low net average debt book rate of 3.8%. And then it also presents then what our interest charges are for the year that just closed, 1.1 million and 1 million. So quite significant amounts going through the revenue budget there in terms of financing charges that allow us to invest in our capital programmes. And then no surprise, our investment returns have increased over budget during the year, and that tracks through the Bank of England bank rate increases throughout the year. And coming in at 260,000 better than budgeted. The key bit of information here, and that it offers a good overview for members to review indicators, thresholds and information, is found in Appendix 1 on page 124. Everybody got that? And at the top of the table it says summary position. As mentioned, the opening CFR, capital financing requirement, that's our underlying need to borrow. It's set out at the beginning of the year. Against that, we track capital spending, because that will always increase our underlying need to borrow because we don't get any funding towards capital investment. And then underneath there, we've got the impacts or how we finance the capital spending. Then you can see CERA, which is capital expenditure from revenue account. We get a number of capital receipts in, grants, and we are able to use some reserves for one-off spending. We have done, and the last time we did that was the CFPT facility at Cardiff Gate. Underneath it talks about the repayment of debt, and we adopt a strategy in the treasury, in our treasury activities, and now that repays off the debt. And then it gives you a closing CFR. So the actual CFR for 22-23 is 42,805,000. And our borrowing position, what members need to look at, what our gross borrowing position at the end of the year is 26,738. So we can clearly see the borrowing is less than our CFR, which means we're in an under borrowed position, which is the key indicator for members. Report moves on to talk about in more detail capital financing requirements. And gives more detail then on the treasury position and limits. So 48 million is our authorised limit. Operational boundary is 46 million, and some indicators there on what we think our financing costs are going to be as a proportion of our revenue budget. So we set out an estimate of 6.85%, and it's actually resulted in 6.10%. And part of the reason for that is we haven't completed all our capital investment plans, and so the need to borrow was not there, and we did not borrow during 2022 and 23. Members' information. Underneath there, you've got detail on borrowing and the type of borrowing we undertake, whether it's on maturity or EIP, which is instalment of principal. It breaks down that 26,736 million pounds worth of loans there and what will be paid in the year. Then it gives a maturity structure then on page 128. It gives members an overview of how much we need to pay in any one year. And then that's our cue for following up our debt repayments and sorting out our cash flows. And that is pretty much it. Take any questions.
Steve?
I think of that particular sheet in the report.
The recommendation is that the Fire and Rescue Authority note the annual Treasury Management Review until 22-23 and approve the actual potential and Treasury indicators set therein. Okay, thank you so much. To item 7.2 on page 129. We go over to Watch Manager Mike Nash. Over to you, sir.
Thank you. Morning, members. Hope you're all well. By now you'll be conversing with the format of this report. I think the report shows a dedication commitment to all staff across the service, ensuring the health, safety and well-being of one another. I'd like to bring attention to the stats that we've got in front of you. First one, the reports that we do for the HSE, that's the Health Safety Executive, to report any new procedures or dangerous occurrences with HSE. Number stayed as it did with the previous year as 9. It is still consistent and is lower than our long-term average as a service. Numbers reported during this period increased by 44 to 58. We have obviously on the back of COVID now started to continue with our off-site training venues. Cardiff Gate has seen an increase in demand as well, so there's been more people coming through those training venues. Times picking up injuries as they go along. The numbers of individuals being off work for over 7 days during 2022 and 23 increased from 9 to 14, total of 913 days being lost. This is an increase compared to the previous year. One of those 35 days of the 913 was attributed to one individual. She has been on long-term sick. Find is that lots of injuries are occurring with ligament and tendon damage and can take time, unfortunately, to heal and repair. We had, thankfully, no major injuries during this time. The total days lost, so as I said previously, was 913, increase of 529 days. We've got a good service within our occupational health unit, where we offer medical recuperation for the service. We've obviously also there's a knock-on effect with the health system and things we have to go outside for, and then there's also waiting lists we need to get to there. Bringing then to near-miss reporting. So there's been an increase from 35, 21-22 to 44. Trying to really push our near-miss reporting, the team, the health and safety and wellbeing team. We want to know when there's been times where an event has taken place that could have caused injury, but thankfully hasn't. So we need to make sure we put necessary control measures in place to stop it escalating. Working with maybe introducing an option on our staff. We've got an online 24/7 system that's accessible from every station. Also reporting service through control as well, if necessary. We continue to work in line with the NFCC stream on health and safety and benchmark our performance across other services, and particularly as a collective 3 services in Wales. We've also looked at external industries as well to see how they work and how we work, and make sure that we're staying up to date with lots of our risk assessments and all measures we put in place. From well-being initiatives, target those towards mental health. Set up working groups within the service. We've got one called Your Health. Very not too distant future, we've got days such as open water swimming to encourage all staff from across the service to get involved in. And we've had many other talks as well arranged in the past, so that continues to be a really positive within mental health area. Continue to have positive engagement with rep bodies as well. So we work closely, myself included, with our FBU, and safety reps take quarterly meetings with them. They come in and sit on our safety meetings where we discuss all the challenges throughout the service, as well as having safety rep meetings as well, which is attended by our operational colleagues and safety team as well. Looking forward, what we're trying to achieve, obviously we want to maintain a high standard of health and safety advice and guidance of the service, continue with doing and writing new, if needs be, risk assessments. Everything we do is risk assessed, whether that's the venues we attend, activities we undertake, we use, everything is risk assessed. That, as you can imagine, is a long process, but we get it there before anybody's exposed to any risk. An online health and safety induction, which has actually just been recently put out in the last couple of weeks. Also micro teaching sessions as well for stations to log in and using Teams. They can have input over the screen. And next month we've got a new accident investigation training that we're implementing across our leaders, health and safety, or operational development and review team, to ensure that we bring a more robust process to our accident investigations going forward. A lot of work ongoing in terms of contaminants, working with the Five Rings Union and Welsh Government to ensure that we can across the service to protect our staff, fire effluent side of things, and reducing any risk of cancer. There's lots of work in the background going on with that as we speak as well. To spring questions.
Steve, as usual, an excellent report. It's always really, really good. Question I got up: you deal with follow-up injuries and the traumatic incidents for staff. You know, when it's done, you visit, or I know it's recorded on the system. But how do you deal with the day-to-day issues with that?
When somebody's on the sick due to an injury, this protocol is obviously a line manager who will deal with that. We've also got our attendance management team within HR as well. They do a lot of following up on the well-being front, ensure that if there's any support they need, then we put them through occupational health needed.
Yeah.
Just to add a little bit to that, at the point of an operational incident, the commander of that operational incident thinks there might be potential for an impact on someone's health or well-being. That is flagged initially, and then in our occupational health unit, then with the individual or crew or crews that we tagged that incident to have a follow-up and provide help and support that they may need at that time.
That's like the emails we get as fire authority members. If there's been a certain injury we tagging, I always see occupational health is tagged into it as well. Yeah,
but the individual can refer themselves as well if need to.
Well, I was worried I didn't want anybody slipping in the neck.
Right, Martin?
Yeah. We have many employees who have suffered serious injury and then go on to suffer with mental health issues because of that injury.
That I'm aware of, nothing that's come across since I've been in the health and safety team.
No, not specific. We do have one of items occasionally suffer from PTSD, stress as a result of the incident. That may lead to further complications, or may lead to leaving the service, but it is rare. But it does happen. It's a low number.
Martin, yeah.
Just a question on page 43, the accidents across time. That there seem to be a couple of outliers here, don't there? Maesteg and Bridgend. Bridgend is a Maesteg, quite small station. Have to take into account the consequences of having the staff off in a station which is quite staff. So I just wonder, are there any specific factors that those in particular?
No, I don't think there's been any factors as such. When we see these sort of trends, that we do always make sure that we work with the station commander to address any concerns we have. But there's been training on particular sites historically in the last 6 months or so, and reinforce reporting of any accidents in the emissions. So whether it's because they know it's fresh in their mind and they perhaps want to be on board with making sure that any incident is reported, then perhaps that's or peak sort of locations. If I could maybe just add a little bit more context as well, is that the Maesteg and Bridgend, the two stations you refer to, have got 4 full-time watchers and an on-call complement as well. So staff on both of those stations is quite a large number of staff in other stations as well. I don't know the stats because I'm going into the detail because Mike is presenting a strategic overview as well. But this might be reflective also of busy operation periods of time that we have as well. And I know Bridgend have gone through a significant program of upskilling around water, rescue and water capability as well. But I don't want to mislead members, but there's been that sort of level of activity that's sat behind why some of these numbers are doing the deeper dive here. You know, they might be add a little bit more context perhaps to the numbers as well.
It's terrible. Okay, no other questions. So the recommendations are that the members accept the report of the rescue in areas of safety and well-being. Members note the overall success achieved in 2022-23, improving our environment to support the health and safety and welfare of staff. Members endorse support a range of initiatives underway to proactively and reactively support health and safety well-being of staff employed as well as fire and rescue. Everybody, yep, here for that. On to page 155,573. Lisa, you?
Okay, thank you very much. So this is the 3rd year update of the carbon reduction plan, and it presented to members to try and track our activities taken to decarbonise and meet the requirements and the goal of being net zero. The report updates members on the plans that have been rolled forwards from previous years, as some of these initiatives are quite long, quite substantial and significant, and therefore are not financial year. So it looks to review what's occurred in the last 12 months. It does this by way of tracker in Appendix 1. I think by way of summary, in the last 12 months, in some way to meet in the criticisms of the Audit Wales report and lack of engagement with the workforce. That's increased there, and that's set out in page 156 in paragraph 2.1. And we've increased that engagement, not just internally, but externally with partners, a number of All Wales groups that we work on together. We've also set up and completed a sustainable procurement project that links both purchase and behaviours with sustainable outcomes. And that's been a very positive initiative for the service. And it focuses shoulders activities and spends in a more sustainable manner. As members will know, we've always working to improve our green spaces and biodiversity on our stations, and that has been sort of testament to the work in Alcombe Vale. And members will be seeing that quite soon as part of your visits. And that initiative was done in conjunction with Tidy and Pen Council. We thank them for their contributions there. And also we've still working to make sure that we automate processes and establish repeatable baseline data and data capture in general. There's quite a lot of different streams of data that we need to collect, and we need to do that on a routine, consistent basis so comparisons are meaningful. And I think on the bottom of page 156, we present information that we reported back to Welsh Government on the emissions return in September. So it gives some information there on our carbon footprint and some descriptions on what the different scopes of emissions mean for us and how controllable they are for us. Then Appendix 1 is really the main piece that gives a sort of practical overview of our task level actions linked to our business plans, business plan owners, strategic plan objectives, and indeed our strategic theme of protecting our environment. And as we know, those things link and map back to the Future Wellbeing Generations Act 2015 and how we meet the requirements therein. So in summary, some good progress made in the last 12 months and some positive action undertaken, although a lot more work to be done. So I'm happy to hear questions from members.
Thank you, Lisa. I think it's great that this is going on, and I still go back to the Hirvine station opened. I was amazed by the roof on the green roof, a living roof on Hirvine station, and that still baffles me. I had a joke, get the boat in to cut the grass and get the vegetation on the roof. You know, it's a way forward, and that's the way it's got to be. You know, and like all new stations should be this way in the future for us. Yes, exactly, Steve.
First of all, it's nice to see we're looking at biogas stuff. That's a good start in with the reduced emission scales. But the question I got, on a scale, where are we on the data process of achieving net zero? So started there, where are we in the...
We haven't made massive inroads that reflect that difference in our carbon footprint, and the main thing for that consider is the scope 3 emissions, which are about our procurement process, and things that we buy. We're at the stage where we're heavily investing in buildings and fleet to be able to pay back in future years those reduced emissions. So what that means is that upfront investment is increasing our emissions through scope 3. But in future years, that should pay back. So I think it's like any sort of investment, it's that upfront gain of the investment, but in future years, we should make life a lot easier for us, and we should see the reduction in our carbon footprint coming through quicker, a little bit further down the line. Does that make sense?
So what you're saying, you're offsetting it against zero. Surely you need to have some data to see where you actually are.
Yeah. So I've given you a snapshot of last year's data. What we intend to do when we come back to next time is give you all the years since we have started. That has been difficult to do because the templates that have been issued from Welsh Government have changed in format since. It's a new and it's a developing area. This is so consistency in data capture, data presentation. There's not been there, not just for us, but I think for everybody that's working to achieve net zero. You know, the metrics that you use to calculate your carbon footprint, they've been in flux for the last couple of years. So we're open to create that consistency and be able to report that within more than 50 years.
To my case, a lot of organisations don't know where they are. That's the unfortunate thing. If you're on a timeline, you need to know where you are. Otherwise, you never ever going to reach the target.
I want to speak first, yeah.
Okay. A chap in number 10, he made an announcement, didn't he? What was it about? Rise in the face of what everybody on the earth is trying to do. Is that going to make any difference? And Steve, we've had a growing Fingilva for over 25 years. The only problem is trying to get a sheep off it.
Our plans. That announcement doesn't change our plans. We're still looking to decarbonise our fleet. I think his announcement was more for domestic families, impoverished families, probably linking with the inflation crisis. So we are working towards achieving a clean fleet.
Lisa's highlighted that it's a small team as well, so you know there's an awful lot of work which has been done. But we also mentioned the staff turnover. I just wonder what size team there is when there's a full implement. Are there any difficulties in recruiting? And can we have an idea of the sort of loss of staff hours that's been over the course of the period, so that we just have an indication of the end of the resourcing capacity at the moment of that team?
Okay, the reason I put it in the report is it's been a theme for the last 2 years. So we've got one permanent sustainability officer, and that has changed twice in the last 2 years. So being able to attract and retain sustainability officer has been very difficult, and the market for these people and these professionals has boomed. And possibly our offer hasn't, but it's reasonable within the context of our organisational process and policy for our corporate staff. So we've today our new sustainability officer starts with us. She'll be the third in 2 years. So yes, we have had difficulty. And we probably need to look at that in the future. I think there's been gaps of probably no more than 4 months when we've been changing from one officer to another. But of course, it takes a number of months for new officers to bed in and sort of make inroads with their workloads. That answers your questions.
Yeah.
I think on that point, can we have an update, say in 6 months' time, on the progress of staff and where we are with this?
Yeah. I think one extra thing to mention is we've done some partner work to secure 40% graduate level. As we share a master's level graduate with Harvard Housing, and that's worked out really well. And they've assisted our one officer, but of course that still means that we've got 1.4 officers in with our sustainability work, but that very much is a linking role that works quite closely with our fleet engineer, our head of property, and stats team as well. Model that we employ here. So that team wouldn't be doing everything. They do a certain amount, and then they link them throughout the organisation to collect data and get updates and initiatives with our service managers.
There's a lot of initiatives with grant funding to look for doing net zero greens. You targeting them? I'm targeting my own.
Yes.
So much. So the recommendation is the fire authority note for your progress, and if you can say in 6 months' time, Lisa, update on this. Great. Thank you so much. 169 over the Southwest Fire and Risk Improvement. You're right.
This is just the certificate of compliance from Audit Wales. That we've met statutory requirements to develop, craft, and publish our improvement 324 for the requirements set out for the local government Wales measure 2000. They're signing off saying they've met everything that we
lost again. Yes. I gotta get that digging all the time. I thank you, Geraint. So on page 17175, so we're getting Geraint exemptions.
This is a report as a monitoring officer. So in my role as monitoring officer, there will be occasions time to time, members are probably acutely aware that we normally competitive procurement process for all the goods and services that we buy, but there are occasions where we either ethical or the circumstances that would lead to situations where we need to go outside of those. Therefore, within our contract procedure rules, there's an option for me as monitoring officer to grant no contract standing orders. The stipulation set out in there is that if those exemptions exceed 25,000 due to disruption of services, we have to report that exemption to the fire report. Back in March 2023, I received such an exemption request. to us for respective investigation services, because we had significant long-term absences of the resources normally sit within the people services directorate to carry out such services. We've subsequently advertised for temporary replacements for those evolution officers, and I think we get those resources in. In the meantime, in that period from October right up to date, there's been significant number of investigations required for various reasons, for disciplinary purposes, grievances, etc. And so we've engaged services of Narrow Key HR to provide those services for all of the investigation requirements. So that this report is just setting out the request came in for that exemption. I approved the exemption, and the exemption still ongoing till the point we point to resources as replacements. Just for members' reassurances, once that process is complete, we'll also look to run a competitive process for future requirements. Should we need to have a draw if those resources either are not available or if there's significant additional work required, we'd have a contract in place and to be able to call off. So we will be running a competitive process as soon as possible. There's information, the recommendations, of the exemption that I granted as monitoring officer in accordance with our planning law.
Thank you. Thank you. 7-6.
Forward with program officers, things the items and for the remainder of the meetings for the rest of the municipal year. The only thing I'll flag for members' information, obviously at this point in time, there's nothing specifically on there around the outcomes of the culture review. Timing wise, she confirmed earlier that it's probably likely to get published early December, so at some point in December. That probably won't meet the timing reporting requirements for our December fire authority meeting, or it's likely we'll probably have to call a special meeting sometime between December and February to consider the outcomes of that report and how we discharge the recommendations within that cultural report. That's the only thing, just for note of the things that may occur to the forward program.
For that, item 8. So any urgent business? I've got no urgent business, so I declare the meeting closed. Thank you very much.